Some bombshell news in the Vince McMahon WWE lawsuit, as the victim's lawyer is now calling for WWE and Vince McMahon to release all of the other women who had agreed to an NDA from those NDAs. And this comes as we have been on hold with this trial, as it seems like the federal government is at the same time investigating Vince McMahon for what could be related charges. There's so much to get into with this story. This is one of the bigger developments we've had over the past couple of months, especially ever since the trial went on pause. So we're going to get into it. We're going to take a look at what Ann Callis, the lawyer for Janelle Grant in this case, had to say, what it means for both Vince McMahon and, more importantly, for WWE, who were actually signed as, who this letter was actually addressed in part to. So we're going to take a look at that. We're going to break it down. We're going to talk about what it means and also what could be next with a potential federal investigation into McMahon and his doings. Before we get into that, though, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you get notified whenever a new video is released. All right, quick recap on this story for those of you who may not know. In January of 2024, earlier this year, a former WWE employee by the name of Janelle Grant filed a lawsuit, against both WWE and Vince McMahon. And there were many horrific allegations as well as evidence that was presented in the original filing. But there's misconduct, harassment, assault, and trafficking among some of the main things that were alleged or implied in that lawsuit. And then, obviously, Vince McMahon the next day resigns from his post as one of the heads of TKO. He then goes on to defend himself, deny these allegations, and ever since then, there's been more and more coming out. Obviously, Brock Lesnar at one point was brought up in this. If you watched the Vince McMahon docuseries a couple of weeks ago, you know that on top of this lawsuit, there are other NDAs that were filed that have been kept under lock and key basically ever since they were agreed to. But now Ann Callis, who is the lawyer for Janelle Grant, who is the woman that is suing WWE and Vince McMahon right now, Ann Callis, the lawyer, actually just released a statement, or a letter, addressed to WWE and Vince McMahon, calling on the release of these women from these NDAs. So let's take a quick look as to what Ann Callis actually said in this. Here's the first part. World Wrestling Entertainment said that, quote, "It takes Miss Grant's allegations very seriously and has no tolerance for any physical abuse or unwanted physical contact," unquote. In other words, WWE would like the world to believe that it has reformed its workplace culture, but if WWE is truly committed to change, it must allow survivors to speak their truth without fear of reprisal. We call upon WWE to publicly waive enforcement of its non-disclosure agreements to allow for its former and current employees and contractors, including wrestlers contracted under the WWE brand, to speak out about sexual misconduct, sexual assault, harassment, and workplace aggression or disputes concerning the toxic culture at WWE. This includes releasing women who signed NDAs related to sexual misconduct by former CEO Vince McMahon, John Laurinaitis, and other WWE leadership and employees as conditions of the settlement. Okay, let's pause there and just talk about that. This is probably the biggest piece of news and a thing of interest to come out over the past couple of months from this. Obviously, the lawsuit itself has been on pause because of an investigation, a federal investigation reportedly into McMahon and potentially related to the trafficking allegations that were levied against him. And now you have Ann Callis, who's been very outspoken recently, or over the past couple of months, ever since she came out to as the lawyer, for Janelle Grant. She's been very outspoken about the need for us to hear from others and that there are other survivors. She even made a point to say that there were others who reached out to her office. And I think part of this, is obviously to put pressure on WWE. It is to put pressure on the defendants in this scenario to give, not only like from a legal point, give leverage to Janelle Grant's statements, but also shine a light into the problems that were happening in WWE and the problems that cannot just be washed away by saying Vince McMahon was the bad guy. Because from a PR media perspective, what every company wants you to think is that all the bad stuff, all of the misconduct, all of the harassment, everything, and this is not just WWE, this is any company, any brand, whatever. The idea is, well, it was all one person. And that's why you always see, like, an attempt to kind of blame or not, or put all of the blame on one person. And that is not to say that Vince McMahon is not a disgusting, deplorable, horrible human being. From what I have read and seen about like him, this case specifically, Vince McMahon is demented and evil, in my opinion. But that does not absolve WWE's part in allowing and empowering McMahon to do so. That is where the toxic culture comes into play. And that is where we as a society, I believe, need to do a better job of holding companies, holding brands, holding entities, organizations, whatever, into account. We need to hold them to account because you cannot just say that it was one bad apple. You cannot just say that it was, a few bad people. It is a system that allowed it to continue. Vince McMahon did this for years upon years upon years. People at WWE knew that these types of things were going on. And there was a system that not only didn't bring these things to light, that didn't report these things, that didn't talk about these things, but it was a system that turned the other cheek, for lack of a better term, that just turned away. And we're not just talking about people who had no power in the situation. We're talking about people who were top executives, top leaderships. That's why you see Ann Callis' statement. That's why you see McMahon listed there, Laurinaitis listed there, but other WWE leadership as well. Because if you're WWE, and she is right to call this out, if you're WWE and you want to get rid of all of the toxicity that surrounds this situation, if you're TKO, you want to turn a new leaf, then we have to know what the hell else is going on. We have to know who else allowed and enabled this and who else might still be doing it. Because at the end of the day, most of the time when we are talking about these, executives who do these types of things or are alleged to have done these types of things, it isn't just one or two people. It's multiple. And when you're talking about trafficking, when you're talking about these allegations as well, this has the potential to be more encompassing than we know. And if you're TKO, you would think that they would want to get anyone who had anything to do with this out. Because that's not only the right thing to do from my company's standpoint, but that is an ethical, moral, and just thing to do. And it's something that we know as far as, like, this isn't just the end of it, right? Like, Vince McMahon has had allegations coming his way ever since the late 80s from Rita Chatterton, a former WWE official. He's had reportedly millions upon millions of dollars in NDAs or in NDA money that has been paid, and hush money that has been paid to fund these NDAs. And there was even one incident that it was reportedly a wrestler, a former WWE wrestler, who had been paid, I think the vast majority of the hush money, the $12 million hush money that was reported in that original Wall Street Journal piece back in 2022. There was a wrestler who had alleged that there was harassment that she suffered from McMahon. So if that's as far as we know, And if this is as far as the hush money goes, that's one thing, but we don't know that. And I think transparency is key. If you're a brand and you're a company that wants to truly reform, you have to be transparent. You have to, at the end of the day, let it all out there. And there has to be truth and reconciliation with that truth. And that's the only way you can truly move forward. Because at the end of the day, the WWE brand helped the suffering to continue. And that is not something that you as a business owner, we talk to TKO as a business owner, Ari Emanuel as a business owner, that's not something that I think they want to be associated with, or you would think they would. Ann Callis' statement goes on to read, the toxic and sexualized culture at WWE during Mr. McMahon's tenure as CEO and chairman was open and notorious. Yet, what has been publicly reported is only part of the picture. We have had witnesses, come to us confidentially and describe a sexualized culture at WWE that victimizes women and men. We have received reports that many victims are currently afraid to come forward because of the punitive and non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreements. For example, as Wall Street Journal reported in July 8th, 2022, Mr. McMahon paid over $12 million to at least 4 women to secure their silence about his sexual misconduct. Our client is just one of an untold many. We therefore also asked Vince McMahon and John Laurinaitis to affirm that survivors and WWE employees who witnessed abuse may speak about their experiences without fear of retribution or retaliation. Now, that part there, we can kind of break into two, because on one hand, you have Ann Callis, talking about what I referred to earlier, that being the idea that there were more people, that more people had reached out to her and her law firm, that more people had come forward and said confidentially that there is more to this. There are more victims. There are more incidences. There's more to this story, for lack of a better term. And that tells you, I think, as someone who is viewing this, and me as someone who's reading about all this, kept up with all the information, it tells me that this is saying this is the tip of the iceberg might be a little bit over dramatic, but there's more that we need to find out in order to holistically change and really make the company a better place. Because right now, even with the Janelle Grant stuff, even with the 4 victims that we know of, it ain't good enough. We've heard about Ashley Massaro, who accused Vince McMahon in a letter that was released after her passing, who accused Vince McMahon of unwanted passes, and was then on TV allegedly put out there and embarrassed on TV, who had suffered an assault that WWE responded in what can only be described as a disgusting way. True change starts, and true reform starts with owning up to what happened. And while it might be easier and less work for a company to focus on, we're breaking all these records, and we're doing all this, we're having attendance records and all that stuff, revenue out the wazoo. It's easy and it's great and it's fantastic PR to do all that, but genuinely fixing problems publicly is harder, and I understand that. But you are a multi-billion-dollar corporation. If anyone can do it, you can. And that's not just a bit of a plea, but that's also just the truth. You should. WWE should reform this. Because if one of the most powerful entertainment companies on the planet, if they can't be held to a certain standard, then no one can. That is the truth of this matter. And that's why this is so important. That's why it's important to hold not only powerful leaders, powerful people, but powerful organizations to account as well. Because if they are allowed to get away with things, and they are in the spotlight as much as they are, then what does that tell you about the rest of society? What message does that send to the rest of society? And Callis also noted another very interesting thing there, in that Vince, in Vince McMahon and John Laurinaitis allowing survivors to speak and allowing other victims out of their NDAs. And if you are Vince McMahon, and I'm going to actually go a bit off script here, I'm going to pull up a statement from Vince McMahon's lawyer. Here it is. So Vince McMahon's representatives literally in replying to this said the same thing that they've said in prior statements. This is Jessica Rosenberg, who is Vince McMahon's attorney. Miss Grant's claims are false, defamatory, and entirely without merit. We intend to vigorously defend Mr. McMahon and are confident he will be vindicated. And that is great. Because if you truly believe that, let them out of their NDAs. Let every single woman who has an NDA with Vince McMahon, let them out. Let them tell their story. Because at this point, if your client is as innocent as you claim and is as victimless or whatever as you assert that he is, let it all out there and let the truth win. Because it should. If Vince McMahon is innocent, then the truth should hear that out and should bear that out. But if he's not, hypothetically, if he's not innocent, then you don't want that out there, one could say. Then you don't want the other people to come forward. Because if he were guilty, hypothetically, that would only add support to the claims in the Janelle Grant lawsuit and bring upon potentially more claims. Ball is in Vince McMahon's court. Ball is in John Laurinaitis' court in that respect. We have one more excerpt from the statement that Ann Callis, the attorney for Janelle Grant, released earlier today. And here it is. Sorry about that. WWE cannot move on from its sordid past while its victims remain silenced. Survivors deserve an opportunity to share their experiences on their terms. Forced silence only deepens the wounds of sexual abuse. Survivors are re-victimized every time they are muzzled and forced to live in fear of attack from a multi-billion-dollar business that can hire an army of lawyers to bury them in legal fees if they speak the truth. Even unenforceable NDAs like the one our client was coerced to sign have a chilling effect because individuals do not have the will or resources to fight them. WWE must clarify that any NDAs that it has entered are not intended to prevent disclosure of sexual misconduct, abuse, or assault, and disclaim and waive any claims it may have under those NDAs if current or former employees and contractors choose to speak out. We urge WWE to move quickly and proactively release its current and former employees and contractors from any obligations under any WWE executed NDAs that would prevent them from discussing sexual misconduct, abuse, or assault during their time at WWE without delay. WWE wants people to believe the company has changed. This is their chance to prove it. That is signed by Ann Callis, the attorney of Janelle Grant, and addressed to Nick Khan, Paul Levesque, Ari Emanuel, Vince McMahon, John Laurinaitis, and Jerry McDevitt, who, of course, has represented McMahon for nearly the past 30 years in some capacity. Okay. So what was basically said there was, WWE, you want to prove that you are reformed. Here is a good faith offer. You don't have to release everyone who's ever signed with the company from NDAs or non-disclosures or whatever. But anyone who says that they experienced sexual misconduct, harassment, assault, or any of those related activities, release them. Because you deserve to know the truth as a company that alleges to have been reformed, and so does the public. And that's the best way to get reform. That's the best way to prove that you have changed, for full transparency and accountability. And one could say that the best way to do that is by seeing the full picture of things. And this would allow you to see the full picture of things. And this is not saying that WWE needs to release everyone who has ever signed with the company from an NDA, because obviously NDAs are not just for these situations. They're for situations that have to do with, creative secrets backstage, or, certain things that have been like pitched in meetings or whatever, right? Like wrestling secrets. Those things no one really cares about. They have nothing to do with the merits of this case, nor the merits of what has been, or the accusations that have been levied the way of WWE, Vince McMahon, and others. We are talking about allegations that are pertinent to not only Janelle Grant's case, but the bigger picture in the misconduct allegations that are against WWE officials. In my view, that seems pretty reasonable. Obviously, do I think WWE will do that? No. Because why should they? From their perspective, they are on a roll. They are on a roll when it comes to their PR. Or I wouldn't say they're on a roll in their PR. Triple H really needs PR training after some of the answers he's been given at these press conferences. But they're on a roll when it comes to attendance. They're on a roll when it comes to revenue. They're on a roll when it comes to this merger with UFC. So in their eyes, they see no reason to take attention away from that as much as it's already been taken away. They want to focus on the positive. And that's the issue. Because it's one thing to say you want to focus on the positive, and that has its moments and that has its merits as well. But in order for you to move forward from this, you have to focus on what happened. And we, the fans, the public who's been following this story, but more importantly, the victims and the potential others who have faced similar situations, they deserve to know that no matter how powerful you are, no matter how much you are entrenched in a company or a brand or whatever, you cannot get away with assault, harassment, or any of the things that have been outlined in either the statement or the lawsuit that has been filed against Vince McMahon. Because WWE, as any other company would, especially one of their stature, should be held to a standard. And if they truly believe that they are reformed, I am inclined to be in the thinking of Ann Callis and her statement. Let it out there. Let's see what the truth is. And let's work towards a better future, a legitimately reformed and better future. But if not, then it is what it is. Again, I am not holding my breath when it comes to the NDAs being released or whatever, but what I could see is more people breaking those NDAs potentially, and them being lifted in some other capacities potentially. But it would be very. I don't think Vince McMahon and John Laurinaitis ever would. Like that is just not in their case. Like they say they're innocent, but it's just not going to help their case. WWE is a different story. It depends on who's making the decisions up there and who is also potentially also implicated in other NDAs. Like, that's the other thing we don't know. So it's a very heavy topic, I understand. And it's something that we're going to continue to follow as we talk about the larger story of Vince McMahon, these allegations, the lawsuit, and how it impacts the business. I'm sure that at some point at one of these pay-per-views, not Crown Jewel because Blood Money Mania, don't got no press conferences, but I'm sure at Survivor Series you may hopefully hear someone ask a question about that in Vancouver. Hopefully someone does, but until then we will see. But guys, let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section below. The letter is linked in the description of this video, so you guys can check that out on your own time. But let me know what you guys thought. Also, be sure to smash that thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you get notified whenever a new video is released. Until next time, be happy, be healthy, and as always, keep it real.